Hi guys, welcome to the first edition of the Meg podcast. I'm going to be joined by regulars Nick Goutrogger and Richard Jeffrey Cook, and we're going to tonight take a deep dive into the Macedonian Successors. Over the coming months, what we intend to do is look at different armies and, following a very similar format, dive into those armies to see how the armies can be built, how they can be used, how they have been used in competitions, to give you an idea of the thought processes that go into those armies. Tonight, in this episode, we're going to be joined by Sid Lawrence Donoghue, who is an absolute expert in the Asiatic Successor army and has used it with great success in both open and themed tournaments. So we're lucky to have a real expert. Also, I must pay tribute to the expertise of Richard and Nick on the history side. You'll be glad to hear that it's not me who will be guiding you through that. Before we move on, I will like to give you a bit of information that Tim Porter has been absolutely fantastic in guiding me on how these podcasts are put together, both by inspiring me with his own fantastic podcasts and then actually being at the end of a direct message to actually help me through the technical journey that I had to go on. Before we start, I know a lot of you out there are getting frustrated because there's not a lot of face-to-face play. That's going to change soon. And obviously, we've had to pause all the tournament scene. That is going to be rebooting with some very exciting tournaments coming up, starting certainly no later than July. And I think we have big tournaments planned for July, August, September, October, and November. So really back with a bang. And then finally, I know there's a level of frustration that the 2021 updates have not been released. And just to put everything square on that, the author, Simon Hall, our leader, he has been very ill and he has not been able to complete that. But the prognosis for his full recovery by April is excellent, and we will see all those changes confirmed in April. So without further ado, let's crack on and start our first edition of the podcast about the Macedonian Successors. Evening, chaps.
Evening.
Evening.
So we're going to talk about successor history, and kind of I know a bit about Alexander, and he died in 323 BC. People argue about what killed him, what he died of, but what I really don't know much about is next. He had a pretty decent army, and people must have been very eager to get the service of those troops. So over to you, chaps.
Yeah, so Alexander dies in June 323 in Babylon. So I'm now worried about that. Oops.
Yes, it was Babylon, Richard.
Was it? Okay, good. And almost immediately the army starts to fight amongst itself because the cavalry wanted to immediately appoint Philip as successor to Alexander, Philip Aridaeus, but the foot weren't keen on this. And as a result, the generals cobbled together a solution that involved waiting to see whether Alexander's unborn child would be a male by Roxanne, his Persian. And that's what essentially happened. So the empire was nominally split between the two successors, Alexander and Philip. The problem was that Philip was unsuitable as he was sort of mentally deficient, and Alexander was essentially a newborn babe. So the power actually lay with the generals, and the situation was that Perdiccas and Craterus, who were the two senior generals, were appointed as regents in Asia, and Antipater was the viceroy in Macedon. So even at this stage, you've got troops that are controlled by different generals in different parts of the empire, and this excludes all the forces that were garrisoning the provinces that extended from India to Greece and most of the territory in between. So you have a very volatile situation almost immediate. And very quickly, the generals start to squabble amongst themselves. Craterus and Perdiccas fall out, and in fact, Craterus is killed by one of the main successor generals in this early period, Eumenes, who was actually appointed by Perdiccas. But Perdiccas doesn't survive long himself. He starts marching with the army to take back Egypt, which Ptolemy had grabbed after Alexander's death. And he actually fails to take Egypt and makes such a botch of it that he is actually assassinated by several of the generals, including Seleucus, who will appear later on in the history and establishes the Seleucid Empire. So as early as 320, there has to be another conference, which is the meeting at Triparidessus. And at that meeting, Antipater is actually appointed as the overall regent. But even during these discussions, there's still disputes. And in fact, Eumenes doesn't accept the resolution, and Antipater appoints Antigonus, who again becomes one of the major generals, to fight against Eumenes.
So can I ask a quick question? So to give you a bit of a break. So Ptolemy's down there. He's taken, obviously, the dynasty survived some time. And what troops did he have available to himself to defeat one of the?
Well, he largely defeats Perdiccas by holding the River Nile and making it difficult for Perdiccas to cross the Nile. His own troops must have been whatever was garrisoning Egypt at the time. It was probably not a particularly large force.
No.
Plus any mercenaries or followers he managed to attract in the couple of years following the death of Alexander.
Because the one thing he wouldn't have been short of.
Egypt was a wealthy province, so he probably grabbed some funds.
I believe the number that's quoted is 8,000 talents, which is a pretty hefty sum.
That would be quite a large block of silver.
Yeah. I think it's probably worth noting one of the reasons Perdiccas probably failed is to get into Egypt, you have to cross a significant enough chunk of desert to make your supply lines really vulnerable. And if you can be held up, as Richard said, on the line of the Nile, on the eastern branch of the Nile, you eventually run out of supplies for your men, which probably contributed to Perdiccas being murdered.
Yeah, there are several generals who failed to take Egypt over the following years. Antigonus himself later fails to take Egypt in 306, 305 BC. So Ptolemy was quite a sharp cookie in choosing Egypt for his and deciding that was going to be his base of operation.
Very sure. So we got in the narrative, we got to the point where a regent had been appointed. His name I've already forgotten.
So that was Antipater, who he had been the viceroy in Macedon. He, however, dies very soon afterwards in 319 BC. That was due to old age. He's quite a rarity. Not many successors to Alexander die of old age.
Very easy.
And he is succeeded by Polyperchon. And Polyperchon appoints Eumenes to basically fight against Antigonus. And in Asia, you get this big conflict between Eumenes and Antigonus that culminates in the Battle of Paritacone in 317 BC and Gabiene in 316 BC. Those are in sort of modern Iran, those two battles. And the eventual winner is actually Antigonus, not because he wins the battles, but because in the last battle, the baggage of the Silver Shields, which is the old veterans from Alexander's, their baggage is taken by Antigonus. And in order to recover their baggage and property and wives, they basically hand over Eumenes to Antigonus, who then decides he's too dangerous to let go and has him executed. So Antigonus ends up as the main general controlling the sort of bulk of Asia, which would be modern day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, basically, and moving towards sort of Afghanistan and the Far East. So that was the sort of big battle between sort of 319 and 316 BC that takes place, and is probably, those two battles are probably our best source for the armies of the sort of Asiatic successor period.
And that ties, just to give you a break, that ties into the Asiatic successor list within the PDF, which we'll be talking about more.
Yes, the Asiatic successor list actually carries on and covers also the Ptolemaic armies and indeed the very early armies of Seleucus, as well. So it actually covers more than just the armies of Eumenes and Antigonus. The characteristics of all those armies were the shortage of Macedonian phalangites, who were rated to be the best troops. So the generals resort to using Greek mercenaries and even recruiting natives to fight in their phalanxes, and they're known as pantatapoi, which basically means trouser wearers, because to the Greeks, anybody who was wearing trousers was clearly an inferior barbarian and not as worthy as the Greeks and Macedonians.
Just to chip in on one thing to note, that even despite the value of the Macedonians, after beating Eumenes by suborning the Silver Shields, Antigonus decided that the Silver Shields were such a dodgy bunch, untrustworthy, that despite their effectiveness, he basically got rid of them, sent them east, and they disappear from history, I believe. Is that right, Richard?
Yes, they were. By this time, they were probably in at least their 60s, possibly even older. So he basically puts them into sort of garrisons where they can become soft and live out their old age. And as you say, they disappear from history. Much to my shame, I think. I think the Silver Shields are one of the sort of exciting features of those Asiatic armies.
They're fairly iconic for the early part. Once you read the history and work your way through the interminable number of Greek names. One reason I'm glad Richard's taken this section was to not have to do too much Greek pronunciation myself.
So far, we've seen the successors basically fighting each other, so Macedonian type armies on pike on pike battle. Is that fair for this period, or were they fighting other people as well?
By and large, they were fighting amongst themselves, or occasionally putting down local revolts. These include revolts of Greek mercenaries. One of the first revolts actually was of Greek mercenaries in Bactria, but there's also fighting amongst the Greek cities, who Alexander had this league of Greeks, and basically they decided on Alexander's death that they'd had enough of this, and you enter into the Lamian War, which is the first war in that the Macedonian have to fight. And in fact, Macedonia basically remains fairly calm after, with one exception, when Antipater is succeeded by Polyperchus. Antipater's son, Cassander, he was expecting to get control of Macedonia. And in fact, in 317, he actually seizes the Macedonian power from Polyperchus. And Polyperchus actually flees to Epirus and gets the support of Alexander's mother, Olympias. And she actually invades Macedonia back to Epirote army. But Cassander besieges her in Pydna, the site later of the Roman battle of the Macedonians, and eventually she has to capitulate. Cassander promises not to have her killed, but then basically goes back on his promise and arranges for relatives of the victims of Olympias to take her, and I think they stone her to death, and thus she dies, and actually Alexander's children have fallen into the hands of Cassandra by this time, and although they survive for another few years, he eventually kills them, and so the actual successors to the Great die, and that ruling dynasty, the Argead dynasty, dies out with them. So Cassander then takes control of Macedonia through his victories against Eumenes. We've got Antigonus has taken control of Asia, and we've got Ptolemy in Egypt, and we've got Lysimachus, who is governor of Thrace, who starts to appear in the picture, and basically over the next sort of 15 years or so, there turns out to be this sort of battle between the various generals, which culminates really in 301 BC, the Battle of Ipsus, where Cassander Lysimachus, with the support of Ptolemy in name but not in actual troops, defeat Antigonus, and Antigonus is killed. And Lysimachus is the big victor because he seizes a lot of Turkey, Asia Minor as was. Seleucus captures Syria and has already captured the east. Ptolemy tries to seize some of southern Syria, Kowil Syria as it's known, from Seleucus, and that ends up starting a chain of wars that carries on for 150 years for control of that sort of Palestine area. And meanwhile, Macedonia ends up, because Cassander dies in 298, and Macedon ends up being fought over between Lysimachus, Demetrius, the son of Antigonus, and Pyrrhus, the Epirot king, who is a nephew of the half-brother of Alexander the Great. And Pyrrhus, of course, is better known for his Pyrrhic victories in his battles for Rome. But you have this whole chain of conflict that really ends in 281, where Seleucus actually defeats Lysimachus at the Battle of Corupedium. But as Seleucus is then crossing the Dardanelles to move into Thrace, he's actually assassinated by a son of Ptolemy called Ptolemy Coronis, the Thunderbolt, who actually seizes the throne of Macedon, but is then killed by the Galatians. And that sort of ends the successor pitch, the early successor pitch, and you end up with the stable kingdoms of Macedon, of the Seleucid Empire, and of Egypt under the Ptolemies.
So is the Seleucid Empire the Asiatic of the Macedonians?
Yes, so it's the Asiatic possessions of the old Empire of Alexander, stretching from Bactria, modern Afghanistan in the east, to Asia Minor, modern Turkey in the west. And then
the area between that and Palestine and Egypt, that was an area of.
Yes, so the sort of Palestine and the area south of modern Syria was disputed between the Ptolemaic dynasty and the Seleucid dynasty, and they go on to fight various Syrian wars, as they're known. So you have the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth Syrian.
But by then you've got this. You've got these three power blocks, nicely defined. You've got Egypt, Asia, and you've got the home country, and it's Greek satellite.
Yes, and that sort of division largely remains in place until the arrival of the Romans.
And then, and we all know 146 BC or whatever, I think it is, the Romans defeat and Macedonia is a Roman.
Yes.
Right, well, that was...
I must say, that's an impressive summary, Richard.
It really was.
I couldn't have done it. I feel obliged to chip in one small thing.
Please.
It just because it's known to so many that people don't necessarily know where it lies within the history. That the Demetrius, the son of Antigonus, the famous besieger, Demetrius the besieger is generally, he undertook his famous siege of Rhodes during this period, the late, so about 305 to 304, I believe, Kutcher's notes, which was, when that failed, the Rhodians allegedly sold off the scrap from his siege machines, and from it they funded the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the seven wonders of the world. So that fits in.
What's that got to do with phalangites?
Sorry?
What's that got to do with phalangites?
Nothing. I just think it's a really interesting bit that fits into everybody's heard of the Colossus of Rhodes, but it fits into this period of history and actually comes out of a failed siege.
I shouldn't be for... Right, well, that kind of ends that section. So we'll move on. Okay, so what we want to do now is look to lists and treat it within Meg, the option available. What we're going to do is Nick is going to talk about the Asiatic list, and then Richard is going to talk, and we can also point out that there are two other lists which would form part of that you might want to look at, which we're not going to tonight. That's the Thraco-Macedonian. So Nick, to you, Asiatic. Where's it found?
Okay, well, it's found in the Syria and Asia Minor set of the classical lists. And it covers the period that Richard has just been describing, from the death of Alexander the Great through to the end of the series of wars between the initial successors of Alexander. So it covers those armies that were based in Asia, hence its name. So we're looking at the armies of Antigonus and Demetrius, Ptolemy, Seleucus when he gets his satrapy, some of the minor people, and obviously Perdiccas immediately after the death of Alexander. So these are really the troops that were left by Alexander in Asia. So and then supplemented by the generals who were fighting over his empire by as many troops as they could get hold of, really. As Richard has already said, Macedonians are the core. They're seen as the really important troops. They're the ones that will give you victory, but then they're in short supply. So they were supplemented by Greek mercenaries who were retrained as pikemen, and the Pantadapoi, that's my pronunciation anyway, the local levies also trained as pikemen, but definitely not seen as good as either Greeks, and especially not as good as Macedonia. To that we add lots of local troops around the edges, but the important troops were always the Macedonian and the other pike. So the list itself, therefore, as you won't be surprised to hear, it has a good core of companions and Xystopheroi, the troops that are basically modelled on the companion cavalry. So it's the armoured cavalry with the long spear charging in the manner of Alexander's companion. They're supplemented by satrapal cavalry and satrapal horse archers. So think of these as Persians mainly, from the Persian Empire. The locals recruited in the style that they were fighting in before Alexander arrived, that formed part of the armies, the last armies of the Achaemenid king. The majority of those available are with short spear and unskilled javelin, with an optional shoot and charge. So they're not as good as the companions, who are still charging lancers with melee expert, as optional and superior. But, they're useful troops, they're good second line troops. And as we all know, by having unskilled javelin, they can evade and run away. So they've got a skirmish function. Almost inevitably, and iconically, I suppose, for many of these armies, you can also have some elephants, because obviously Alexander brought elephants back from India, where he campaigned. He was, like everybody is, much taken with them. He was impressed by their performance when he fought Porus, so he brought them back, and they almost became a compulsory part of armies if you were a king. So there are, in list terms, there's 0 to 6 available, which is a pretty good number. So after those cavalry, we're down to the core of the infantry, the heavy infantry. Now, as we said, the Macedonian phalangites are seen as the really important bit, so they feature. But this might seem odd to some people. They're not compulsory, because as Richard mentioned, not everybody could get hold of them. There's only a limited number of them, but you can have 0 to 24 in the list. The compulsory pikemen are actually Greek mercenaries, who are just average pikemen, and they're different from the Macedonians. They don't get shoved. And then you can have a good chunk of the Pantadapoi as well, who are also pikemen like the mercenaries, but they're compulsory combat shy. They weren't seen as good, they didn't perform. So that's your core of the heavy infantry, to which you can add a few hoplites and then some loose order troops like Thracians and Asiatic. One really interesting part of this list is that the Macedonian phalangites, the 0 to 24 you can be upgraded to superior, but there's a limitation on how many you can upgrade, and it depends whose army you've got, to reflect who has got access to them. Now, the minor players of the period can't get any. People who've got some and got hold of some of the veterans, like Antigonus, Demetrius, Seleucus and Ptolemy, are allowed to upgrade 1 tug to elite. So, although they made a lot of effort getting them, they've only got a limited number.
To elite?
Sorry?
They can upgrade them to elite?
So they upgrade them to superior. Sorry, elite, I'm using the word elite in the general term of the better than average. they're not exceptional in Meg terms. Eumenes, however, because he had the silver shields, remember what Richard was saying about them, and the silver shields basically carried all before them, he can upgrade all 24. He can have 3 tugs of them. But there is a kicker.
Like Napoleon's old guard.
Yeah, they're great. They'll defeat anything in front of them. But as I said, there's a kicker in this. Eumenes wasn't a Macedonian. He was from Caria. And because of that, I think he was seen as a bit of an upstart. Would that be right, Richard?
Yeah.
I think he'd been Alexander's secretary, hadn't he?
He had indeed, yes.
Ooh, I remember some of my history. Whilst Eumenes can have these 3 units of superior phalangites, he's not allowed any sub-generals. He can only have allied generals, which can therefore rather screw up the army in terms of command and control. But I think if you get it right and put those 3 units into something, especially in period against other successor armies, they can do exactly what happened and knock a big hole in the enemy. So anyway, after the pikemen and the cavalry, you can have hordes and hordes and hordes of archers and slingers, all skirmishers. You could have 80 or 90 bases of these guys to represent the hordes of local troops that were sometimes recruited into these armies. Even I believe Antigonus and Eumenes, although they had access to quite a lot of proper troops, if you like, also had large amounts of these skirmishers bulking out their armies. So there you are. It's basically a development on from the Alexandrian Macedonian, but with some twists in that you have to play around with the good troops to get what you want. There's plenty of options in the army. Some people can have allies. You can have classical Greek allies. You can have hoplite allies. There's a Cappadocian ally allowed, and Ptolemy can have Cypriot allies, which is another Greek ally. So, and you can always have internal allies in the army as well. So plenty to play around with, plenty of options, plenty of ways to build this army. You can have lots and lots of phalangites, or you could have a fewer but very tough number of phalangites. Okay, I'll leave that there.
And the command and control, all professional. Yeah?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Thank you, Ray, for pulling me up on that, because I just blithely assumed that everybody would know that. Yeah, all the generals are professional, whether they're allied or not, other than external allies. So you always have the option of that professional command and control. You can have your CNC as a floating general if you want it to get extra flexibility. And there's no limitation on the quality of the generals you're allowed in that. So you're allowed the full gamut for any of the generals, army commander, sub or internal ally, from mediocre through to talented, or obviously legendary, should you wish to, for the CNC.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on to Richard, we're going to move on to Macedonian. And where might we find this?
Thank you, Ray. So the Macedonian successor list is in the Greek and Macedon list set in the classical period. So where you would expect it, I hope. The Macedonian successor list is in some ways quite similar to the Asiatic successor, but in other ways a bit different. So first off, you don't get as many elephants as you would with the Asiatic successor. Most of the elephants actually originated with generals in the east, where they acquired them, either the ones that Alexander had brought back from his campaigns, or Seleucus actually makes an arrangement, Mauryan Emperor Chandragupta, and brings back 500 supposed elephants, some of which end up in first the army of Lysimachus and end up eventually in the hands of Pyrrhus, takes them across to Italy. So those are the elephants that appear in the Macedonian successor list. The cavalry is pretty similar. You've got the Zistophoroi, as they are referred to in the sources, the lance arm cavalry that fought in the Macedonian style, using the ziston is the lance that they used. But you can also have Greek cavalry who provide more of the skirmish on the strike, the Zistophoroi, and some horses as well. But the main components are the foot, similar in that you can have one tug of the veteran or elite phalangites, who are the superior protected pike with shove. The core of the army are the Macedonian phalangites. That's probably a broad term that would have covered some Greeks and others that have been trained to fight as phalangites as well. But they're categorized, we categorize them just as Macedonian phalangites. And they can be supported by Greek mercenaries who are classified as hoplites for this army. Along with that, you can have some of the barbarians from the northern Macedonian borders, Thracians or Illyrians, and along with skirmishers, that provides the bulk of the army. An interesting option, if you're brave, is to re-equip your phalangites as Euxenoi. Euxenoi was the Greek term for lightly equipped, and they can skirmish, and they're short spear and melee to be, and they're great for going up hills, beating anything else that's to fight the terrain, but perhaps not a typical choice for your average tournament army. With the Macedonian successor, you get a range of different ally choices, depending on which general you want to fight as, but you can get a sort of classical Greek, so these will be hoplite army. But if you're Cassander, you can also, he allied with the King of Paeonia in 310, and so you have Paeonian ally if you want something a bit different. So command and control, you can have one internal ally if you want to, but typically you're just operating with an army commander and professional subjects.
Thank you, that was succinct. Okay, so far what we've heard a bit of the history, and we've seen what's available to the two lists, the Macedonian Successor, Asiatics. And now what we're going to do is we're going to, the three of us are going to say how we would build a list. Nick is going to do Asiatic Successor. Richard and Ray are going to do Macedonians. And then we have an interview, a pre-recorded interview with Lawrence Donahue, better known as Sid, who uses Asiatic Successor in anger in big talk. And we're going to see how he puts together. And then we'll really, at the end, sum up. And before we move on to another section, talk about how this might do. So, Nick, without further ado, your stab at Asiatic Successor.
Okay, thank you. I did feel that as Sid is the expert on this army, that having to do an army that wasn't his version was a bit of a short straw in this case, because I think my normal instinct would have been to say, I'll use Sid's version.
However, you're getting your excuses in early.
Absolutely. My other excuse is this is nothing like armies I normally use. You know, it's somewhat lacking horse archers for a start. Okay, anyway, on a more serious approach to it, I have gone for a different approach to Sid. Sid's army is very big, lots of pike, and has a sort of counter-punching approach, as I'm sure Sid will be explaining later. So I've sort of gone for a version I've decided is for Demetrius the Besieger, the son of Antigonus. And I've sort of set this up as a Demetrius tries to do Alexander. So it's designed to have a hard-hitting punch with the companions and some hard-hitting infantry as well, and then other troops that can hopefully hold off the enemy long enough that the victorious hard-hitting troops will be able to get the victory for you. It certainly involves some compromises. At least one of them can be corrected if you want to do that by a quick change. But anyway, for the people out there, what I've gone for is a legendary professional army commander, as Demetrius. He's got 2 mediocre professional subgenerals, and I've gone for an Athenian ally for some hoplites, led by a competent, instinctive ally general. So instantly there's a bit of a compromise. People almost always go for talented. I can almost hear Ray going, I wouldn't do that.
Mate, the way my luck is, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
There you go.
But equally, I know Richard.
I know Richard does do it.
Yeah, and he's far better at crunching the numbers than I am, so I feel in good company.
Richard actually once tried to educate me that a competent, instinctive general was perfectly fine with it for an ally. I don't believe it.
Yeah. It could be a bit of a risk in this because anyway, to just go down the army sort of top to bottom as is on the lists, which will be made available to people. So I've got 6 full fat companions. You know, they're drilled loose, superior protected, charging lance and melee expert. So the 6 of them, they are an almighty punch. And unsurprisingly, the plan would be for the legendary Demetrius to be leading those to knock a dirty great hole in the opponent's line. We've got 2 units of satrapal cavalry to support those in the mounted wing. Just 2 4s of average protected, formed loose cavalry with short spear and unskilled javelin. 2 units of 4s make a very useful tag team in my experience, being able to skirmish. If you need to hold up a wing,
yeah,
those 2 can do it quite well. I've done it quite successfully with Roman equivalents in my Imperial Roman army. And if you didn't need them both to do it, one can always act as a support somewhere. Also in the mounted department, I've gone for elephants. I only could squeeze 3 in. Unfortunately, I'd have liked 4, but points being what they are. So I've got 3 elephants with shove. I have to say it's a bit of I like using elephants. That's why they're there. Other people might want to choose something else. For the same points, you can pretty much get a unit of average pikemen. So, yeah, again, that's a choice. And on to the pikemen. I've taken the 1 unit of superior pike with shove that the list allows Demetrius, mentioned earlier. You're restricted on those. And then 2 units of Greek mercenary pikemen. They're the ones without shove. 1 is average and another is poor. So again, there's another compromise. That's very much points driven. You save a lot of points by going down to poor, but they're not going to stand up to a superior pike phalanx very long. So there's some risk there, but it got me sort of the army size I wanted, because I ended up with 9 tugs. You remember I mentioned an Athenian ally. He's only 2 units strong. They're both 8s. They're both hoplites, protected long spear, shove and shield cover. But one of them are elite hoplites, so they're superior. So again, this is building into the theory of this army is going to probably almost certainly on one flank or towards one flank, deliver as heavy a punch as it possibly can to try and break the opponent's army, because it's not going to win a battle of attrition. So, you know, in the punch side of it, I've got the companions led by Demetrius, elephants, if we're trying to punch through enemy cavalry. Alternatively, they could possibly be used to help hold up a flank in the manner of Seleucus's elephants at Ipsos, for those who want to read the history. Then you've got the elite Macedonian phalangites, the superior phalangites, and the superior hoplites to give some oomph. I've used superior long spear troops against pikemen before now, and they work quite well. They don't go through them very quickly, but they can work on a battle of attrition, because as the bases go down, they lose factors slower than the pikemen. So after that, the Athenian hoplites and the Greek mercenaries and the satrapal cavalry's job is to hold off the enemy as long as possible while Demetrius and the shock troops are doing their work. Just to round out the army, I've got a couple of skirmisher units because I think it's useful, one of which are some absolutely dreadful javelin men. They're poor, unprotected, unskilled javelin combat shy. 6 of those comes in at a whopping 96 points, only 16 points a base. Their only role in this army, in my view, is to stand in front of the elephants if the elephants are likely to be shot at. Yeah. They're there to catch missiles. Elephants, only a tug of 3, really vulnerable to losing bases. You don't want them sniped away by enemy skirmishers or anything. So the javelin men are there to cover them. Then I've also put in a unit of, albeit poor, Asiatic slingers, experienced sling combat shy. I just like the idea of having one unit for myself to be able to do a little bit of sniping, possibly in support of those heavy troops charging in, led by Demetrius. However, just back to the general, the ally general being competent and not talented, which is the more popular option. If you absolutely wanted a talented general to lead those 2 Athenian units, if you drop the Asiatic slingers, it gives you enough points with the 8 unused points in this army to upgrade that ally to talented. So if you really wanted, personally, I'd be tempted to take the risk and go that way. So that's the theory behind the army. It's got a poor unfortified camp. It comes out with a pre-battle scouting a PBS of 9 cards to give you a good chance of winning the card phase when you're playing within the map in the pre-battle stage, and scouting of 3. Now 3 is not vast, but it's probably not bad in period. I suspect a lot of armies in period scout at 2, so you might even have a scouting advantage. Just a last thought, this army, I've built it pretty much with the idea that it would be in a Hellenistic-y, classic-y theme. I'm not sure I'd want to use it outside of that. I think it's got vulnerabilities. So anyway, that's my army. That's my thinking about it. I pass it to the floor for comment, derision, and anything else, really.
It's not that I don't like it.
But you don't like it.
when we go through my list, you'll see there are things I like about it, but I just feel, and it's the first time I've seen it, I haven't seen this until now, I think you made too many compromises and you might have ended up with a...
I find it interesting because when we come on to looking at my army, it's actually interesting how in some ways I've gone for similar sort of choices. So I can see the thinking behind it. I have to say I agree with Nick. I'm not sure it's an army that I would take to an open competition, but it's one I might be quite happy to use a themed kind of period.
Yeah, you see, I think in a themed competition, I don't think you've got enough to hold up, and neither have you got enough to go and attack.
I think plenty to attack with the companions, 2 superior infantry units, and elephants.
Yeah, but others. I think the superior infantry. Yeah, maybe it's a grind, isn't it? Depends what they hit. But in period, they're I think what I like about this the most, and you'll see this in the list I put together, is I like the 9 PBS and rescouting. It wasn't meant to be an insult, but I really like that, because I think that helps this army to do what it wants to do. Because I just think that you're talking about holding up, and I think so. I think you find with this army that what you want to get in, i.e., your superior infantry as part of your attack, it's easy to hold them up, because if somebody puts a four of their own satchel cavalry in front of them, they're not really marching across the board, are they? So that would be my worry, that the part of the attack force. So my final point is, part of what you've described as your attack force might just be bogged down as the hold up force.
It depends how you play it. I mean, fours of cavalry can hold up things to a certain degree with any army.
Yeah.
But one of the great advantages of Meg is you get results in normal game times because you run out of table running away. You know,
yeah.
Because if somebody, say, drops a four of satrapal cavalry in front of something like the elite phalangites or the elite hoplites, they can't really risk standing and fighting.
No.
The chances are you're going to drop a four in front of them, and they could be broken in a turn, and then you one tug down. So
yeah,
they can skirmish, but if you're a bit clever about it, you can pressurise them.
Yeah, everything is possible, but moving three and a four of cavalry, skirmishing cavalry, even stopping you marching in the first turn, depending on who gets first turn. You know, I'm not saying you wouldn't have first turn, but they can stop you moving more than once.
Yeah, I mean, I
just think there are challenges which I know you're a good enough player to overcome, but I think the list does have challenges. It feels quite finicky, and therefore is an army that a lot of things have to go right. There you go.
I don't see where you're coming from. I think it's. I suspect it could be a win big, lose big army.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it. If the companions led by a legendary general go right, they're terrifying.
Absolutely.
I mean, it isn't quite the Agema led by Alexander, but you only want one claim down on that.
Absolutely.
So it's
right.
I mean, one thing I didn't say is you probably would be looking to get the first move in.
Yeah.
So, but again, you're legendary in PBS of 9. Hopefully,
you're doing everything you can, especially in period pre-battles. But I've got a sneaky feeling that there might be 3 people here trying to control the pre-battle system. I don't know yet because I haven't seen Richard's list. So why don't we talk about Richard's list? So, Nick, if you unscreen share.
Okay, done. All 3 for Richard.
Cool.
So you show.
Sorry, Richard. We're live on air to million.
You can swear at the technology, rail edit it out, or not.
So
I've only made Richard swear one.
Let me share my army. So this is my Macedonian Successor army. It's the army of Cassander with a Paeonian ally for 310 BC. It consists of just the 3 generals, but 2 talented, including the Paeonian ally. It's basically an infantry army. It has 1 unit of Zistophori who are there just to provide support to the infantry push, really. And the thing that's novel about it, I suppose, is using a couple of units of Paeonians with a talented ally. The hyperspice are superior short spear, experienced javelin and melee. So they're quite tough troops, with the option, of course, of going through terrain, which if you're facing other armies of this period, may not be able to stand up to you. Supported by the compulsory unit of Paeonian warriors, if you've got them as an ally, and the option of having some Illyrians who are the tribal flexible, so they can operate both the sort of difficult terrain or the plain open terrain as required. The core is the 3 tugs of Macedonian phalangites, supported by 2 tugs of Greek mercenary hoplites. So I probably have the phalangites together with the mercenaries to protect one or both things. Use the Zistophori as a sort of reserve bit like Pyrrhus would do later on against the Romans, perhaps, and use the Paeonian as a thrust, preferably through some difficult terrain. But if the battlefield's completely open, they're probably tough enough to handle most things, although companions led by a legendary general is going to scare them, that's for sure. Again, bit of support with the light troops, unit of Cretan archers, skirmishers to provide some skilled shooting, useful against those pesky fours of satrapal cavalry, because they're not going to last long if they try skirmishing in front of an archer. Light horse, again, Cantabrian light horse, just to provide a bit of a threat on probably on a flank, and some Paeonian javelinmen to, again, they're poor, but these ones are experienced javelin, so can do a bit of damage. And again, they're 9 siege. So the army has a PBS of 8, so it doesn't quite hold up to the legendary general with the 9 PBS cards, but my scouting is also so. That's
the thing
my.
I really like in this army, because, for example, poor troops, are trying to stand in the lines of something up, they'll eat them. And then, as you say, somebody trying to
Used in the right situation, they can make a difference.
Yeah.
I just murdered to be able to fit them into my list, but it just didn't. Yeah, they can be very, very useful. Often sniping from between 2 other units.
So, Richard, in your mind, what are you trying to achieve in the pre-battle?
I'm looking, I suppose, for the one bit of terrain that will allow me to anchor the army.
To work around, or
Then
work
the
to one side of.
So if I get the choice, I'm probably looking at mountains as the terrain option. But as I say, it's an army that if you end up on an open plain, it's solid enough and probably hold its own against most things in period.
I really like the ally.
Yeah, that surprised me.
I think I've come across it when playing against a Galatian. I think Galatian can have that ally. Matt Pool's Galatians have.
Yes, I think when they invade in 280.
Yeah, and those pain in high pacifists are great. You can say, oh, pity they're tribal, but you can't have everything. It's under 1,000 points for 8 superior short spear melee expert troops.
And with a talented general, you hope you get the command. You've got 4 cards. You hope you get the card that allows you to do what you need to do with them.
Yeah.
I mean, you need a green to wield, don't you, with the general?
And to be honest,
I suppose you need a yellow with a general to upgrade to double move. That's always the
Yeah.
It's going with the 4 cards. You're improving your odds.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why you're improving your odds of their playing at the start of the game, and B, you're improving the odds that you'll get the cards that can get there exactly.
I mean, the chances are you'd only want to double move early on, or the double move you must make is going to be early on if you need to work the terrain piece.
Agreed. Unless you've got an open run at the baggage, or they're slightly to one flank and all the actions somewhere else.
Yeah.
You can see how, because they can't wheel and double move, can they?
No.
So I use a lot of tribal troops. If they're not in exactly the right position, but then hence the 8 PBS, 3 scout. If they're not in the right position, they can find it difficult to get in the game.
Usually the terrain, if you're using them with the idea of moving them through terrain, you don't need to wheel them. It's usually a point at the terrain, and they'll move towards that. It's then the ability to wheel them afterwards into the threaten the flank or what you can do. Yeah. The weakest aspect would be if you reach the edge of the terrain and then you're into open terrain beyond that, and your opponent has skirmishing cavalry. But even then, you can keep pushing forward, and you've got if the enemy cavalry come in range, you've got the experienced javelin. And if you're superior and melee expert, even if you're loose, you're probably better than most of the skirmishing cavalry you're going to find in this period anyway.
Yeah, and I've been pleasantly surprised by that ally. Just so, are the Illyrians part of the ally, or is it just Paeonian are the ally?
Yes, the Paeonians are the ally. The Illyrians are part of the main force, and they're either to, if you've got sort of a gap with terrain either side, you can use the Illyrians on the other side, or you can use them to support the Paeonians, and therefore have three units that can go through terrain. Not many armies are going to be able to hold up that sort of.
No. Well, if they can hold that up, they can't hold up the pike and the spear coming to.
I think in period you're not going to find anything. I think again, like mine, I think you might have mentioned that you wouldn't necessarily use it out of the sort of classical era.
I think that's a problem with any pike army, that they aren't generally the best armies to use in open competitions, because you've got a relatively short frontage and are quite vulnerable to missile troops. So any horse archer army is going to start causing you problems.
Yeah, especially in a more open competition against horse archers, you're probably a card light, and you can maybe two. Allowing for the fact 4 of them are sitting with your Paeonian.
Yes, it's most pike armies are going to be a struggle against.
But that I think we're all impressed by the Paeonians.
Definitely.
Excellent.
So should we move on to my dribble?
This is the guy who generally turns up with dribble and then beats you.
Yeah, we don't believe that anymore.
I don't know what you mean. Right, so there's a theme emerging, chaps.
Yes, the theme is you've not shit. Oh, there it is.
Well, so Macedonian Successor army. I've got 9 tugs and a sug, so it breaks on 5. My commander control a legendary professional leading the army. Don't ask me for which historical character it's chess. I'm playing the black chess piece. I'm only joking. That's a nod to an Alexandrian Macedonian player who we all know. And then 3 mediocre professional. I end up with a PBS of 9 and a scouting. And
so much for my prediction that 2 would be normal.
Yeah, well, yes, I know, but
goes my foresight.
The thing about the 9 is that I can make sure the 3 are really good. You're just reducing the chances of it being crap. So I want to think I've won the game before I put any troops down. That's my idea, because the idea about this army is I'm not going to fight your whole army.
Yeah.
And I know that's easy to say, but hey, we have to have a plan. I know as soon as we start, the plan goes to hell in the high water. But okay, so I've gone for. So I'll go through the list now. Sorry, being serious. So I've got 3 tugs of average pike. So they're infantry drilled, average protected pike shove, and I've got 3 tugs of those. I've then got a tug of Greek mercenary hoplites, again an 8, and they're drill close, average long spear.
Do you want to tell him, Richard, or shall I?
You go ahead.
What have I done?
The Greek mercenary hoplites would need to have shield cover and shove.
Oh, well, I'll find some points somewhere. You know my first attempt to the list is going to be wrong. Should have sent it to you guys. Okay, fair enough. Do I have to have orb?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
You don't. Orb is optional.
Right, so knock off the orb,
Oh, sorry,
put
orb.
all the stuff in.
Yeah, that'll save you about 20 points.
Do some jiggery pokery, and I'm there. I've then got 2 4s of these of Greek cavalry. So they're cavalry drilled loose, average protected, short spear, unskilled javelin. Got 2 4s of them, and going to be using them in the way that we've already spoken about. And then I've gone for 2 tugs of the Zeistophorai. So these are cavalry drilled loose, superior protected, charging lancers, melee X. So, and there's 2 tugs of 6 of those. And then I have also gone Thracian mercenaries, who, after seeing what Richard's got to offer in that department, they're just going to be dog meat if I play Richard. So they're infantry, formed loose, average protected, and then one light horse sug. And really, I'm playing the game that my 3 units of Phalangites and my Greek mercenary hoplites, who will be suitably equipped, can hold you, because I am going to because I'm going to outscout you, and I'm going to have a good idea of what the terrain is. I'm going to hit you somewhere that causes you a lot of pain. Legendary general leading the Zeistopharai. Maybe using, if it's a tactical game, using the Greek cavalry to evade, draw you into a trap, hit you. It's quite flexible from that point of view. But really what I'm doing is I'm using 4 tugs to hold you, and then I've got to hit, because of that, I've got to work really, really fast. And that's what I was talking about. My strike force is quick. That's it, guys. That's Ray's rubbish idea.
Yeah, that's almost a classic tactics of Alexander, using the pike as the pin, the anvil really, and the Zeistopharai as the hammer to burst through and break the opponent line. So it looks pretty solid to me.
And personally, I mean, Nick, that's in a way, that's why I wasn't trying to be critical, and I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying if you're going to try and do that, I think you've got to do it big. You've got to go big or go home. So that's why I've got the 2 unit.
Yeah, as I said, I had the Nellies as the other option on mine, I suppose.
Yeah, I hate elephants, glass cannon, and all that.
Yeah, I've gotten to like them. Blame my Sassanid. This is got a good chunk of manoeuvrable stuff in. I don't see the use of the Thracians, other than they're making you 9 units. I'd almost wonder if you can find a really cheap filler unit to replace them. Whether, oddly, this is an army that could benefit from a fortified camp that really free up your cavalry to go wherever you want them.
That's not a bad shout, and I have to admit, especially after we hear the interview from Sid, I did this list before I heard his interview, and when you hear what he says about, mind you, he hasn't been introduced to Paeonians. He's very scathing about an odd unit of Thracians that just don't do anything, and I feel that they would be the unit that don't do it. Would I need to put them in a piece of terrain to anchor the flank of the phalanx? That's what you would probably use them for. They are formed, they're not tribal, but Richard, for example, would just point and shoot, and that's it, they're gone.
Well, I think I would replace them possibly by having 2 tugs of 6 mercenary hoplites rather than the 8 and the 8 of Thracians.
Yeah, and because they're drilled, I think those Greek mercenaries, the idea of them being, I was actually thinking that they would always be, the formation they would start in definitely would be 4 rows of 2 columns, like a phalanx.
The fact that apart from the Thracians, your army's drilled is really useful.
Yeah,
makes the most of you've got 11 command
cards.
But I've used 11 with a basically drilled army. My Romans, it's fine. Once you got your head round it and can throw in the odd tactical pass along the way, 11's fine when you got drilled. But you have to be fairly in control of yourself, fairly disciplined.
Oh dear. but equally, my heavy foot, my close foot, it's not running across.
I was saying, in some ways, your cavalry run free, don't they?
Yeah, it's there. It's all so situational. But in that game you play in your mind, it really is there to hold up. Even staggered, sacrifice a unit, hold up, throw some of those Greek cavalry in while hopefully something else happens. But so in that sense, it is a bit of a kind of or bust.
Yeah.
And I'm no Alexander.
I can't help feeling because of the hold up. You could almost do with a competent general to be able to drop 3 of them back as a block.
I have to say I'm sceptical about having 3 mediocre professionals, just because you've got 3 tugs of phalangites and 2 supporting infantry, whether they're Thracians or whatever, and that is 5 tugs, and you're going to need all 3 generals to command those. That means who's commanding the Greek cavalry, which means if they're under the command of the legendary with the Zistophori, and you're going to throw Alexander or Antipater or whoever it is leading this army into the fray, you could suddenly find that you're struggling to command the army a bit.
Yeah, I submit the army I've used with that sort of number of cards hasn't had a legend. It's only ever had a competency in C. You tie up a lot in the legendary, and they're expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the way. You can use the legendary to achieve the breakthrough, and if it works, it can be very effective. But if he gets bogged down for any reason, then all of a sudden you've got that problem of anything else that he tries to command is out of command, and you're running out of cards very quick. So it's a bit of a gamble, that one.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the kind of thing that me personally, I know there are guys out there who are listening, or our listener might be able to play these battles in their head. I have to get tested.
I'm the same. That army I came up with, the only way I'd really know about it is to plonk it on the table and see how it moved. I can't do the thought experiment properly. Okay,
so the 3 of us have waffled on about our. In fact, I have to say, Richard has used Asiatic Successor, I think, in an open or a competition at least.
I've certainly used it in competition.
But what we're going to hear from, who we're going to hear from next, is someone who's used one of these armies, the Asiatics, in anger in open
Ray
period competition.
So Ray, let's say before we hear from the expert, could you just wonder between the 3 of us which of our 3 armies we prefer?
Oh, good call.
Yeah,
well, I've got to just put my vote down first. I've been so awed by if there's such a word, by the Paeonian hypaspists. I'd have to have that army.
It's tempting me. Out of the 3, I'd be happiest to field that one. I think.
I think it's if you don't mind me saying, Richard, it's a safer bet, definitely.
I have to say I would stick with my army. I'm afraid.
I think Ray and I are both leaving leaving more to chance than you are.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think both Nick and I were trying to squeeze a style of play into an army we've never used, type of army we've never used. So I don't own a single pikeman. So that's not true. I have some Burgundian pikemen or something like that in one of my medieval armies, but only a couple of tugs. So this was a real okay. How can I do something different? And what did I do? I came up with what people did anyway historically. So which is kind of reassuring, actually. All right. So enough guff from us. What we're going to do now is we're going to hear from Sid. And then we're going to come back and we're going to wash up the section on the Meg list. So without further ado, we're going to hear from. So that was great to hear from Sid and how generous of his time. Also to really just open up and tell us exactly how he uses it. I think he's confident there's nothing he can do about it. I think that's what he feels. So he'll tell you exactly what he does with it. Because Sid, how are you?
Great, thanks, Ray. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, no worries. It's good to have an expert in this particular list. So really, could we just quickly run through your list? And your list will be published with your permission on the supporting website so people can see it. But why don't we just quickly run through it together?
Yep, no problem. So starting at the top then with the generals. I mean, with this army, I've got all professional generals. Competent professional for commander-in-chief, they're talented, competent and mediocre subs. The idea is that on this, with the actual formation, is the competent CNC is a floater.
Right.
So when you're setting your army up, effectively you're your mediocre general on the refused flank, generally defending, doesn't need many cards, can sit there and not move very much. Your talented is in the middle, with the bulk of the decent pike that want to go forwards, light troops and possibly 1 cavalry unit. And then the remaining competent general is on the flank or in the reserve with around about 3 cavalry units. And the floating general is always sat in the middle, so he's got the best command and control.
Yeah, And just for those players who aren't as experienced, having the floating C&C means that you can pass cards to your generals within your command range, meaning that if you really need some cards at any particular point, it's maximising the chance of having them.
That's correct, and getting decent cards in the right place.
Yeah.
The other thing that people seem to forget, you can hold one card more. So a mediocre general can be given effectively extra cards. So you can give an extra card, say he only gets 2, extra card to make it 3. If he doesn't use any cards that turn, he keeps all 3 for the next turn.
Okay. So I knew he could have more during the turn. I thought he had to discard it at the end of the turn. So that I've learned a rule.
So you can carry one extra one forward. Each general can. So if you've got a flank which isn't doing anything, load it up with an extra card. Because when it comes to be used, he's got 3 instead of 2.
Nice. I shall squirrel that piece of information away and check that afterwards. I'm not doubting you. I just will need to burn that one in my brain. Okay, so if I just sort of said to you, you've talked about the command and control. Before we get on to the detail of this, why there are many pike armies out there. I know this podcast is about the successor armies, but what drew you to this list?
If anything, I think it's just the number of pike, I'll be honest. Yeah, I think so. In an average list, I can get 6 pike blocks. This one has 7.
Right.
And it absorbs your opponent because of the fact that you just see the numbers, especially in an ancients list.
I mean, it's horrible when you sit across the table, having done that. When you sit across the table, having to put on the spot, it's a horrible brick of pike. And I guess in that kind of min-max, sorry to interrupt you, so in that kind of mid-max way, you've just gone for the max. There you go.
Exactly. I mean, I even shed the Thracians from this list because I couldn't see it was an Achilles heel. So it's filling a gap in the line. They were tribal as well, so they didn't maneuver very well. So I ditched the Thracians for an additional pike block. So I mean, I find, for example, if you have terrain, you either just avoid it or you send the cavalry.
Yeah.
You have short spear and skilled javelin cavalry. They can go in terrain and they can evade.
Yeah.
So
if we now run through your list for the listeners line by line, I'll just read it out quickly. So you've got 2 tugs of companion in a 6 and a 4.
Yeah.
You've got 2 tugs of satrapal cavalry, 2 4s. Then you've got 7 blocks of pike and some skill bow Cretan archers who I'm sure are often the stars somewhere in your list.
They are, yeah. So I mean, the effectively you've got hammer and anvil approach with the army. So the anvil is the pike, primarily the combat shy ones. So you've got 4 blocks. They are, to all intents and purposes, when you shoot at them, the same as the regular pike. They're combat shy. It does not affect shooting factors against them.
Right. So it's not like you've downgraded them to poor when that would affect that.
Correct. Yeah.
Did you experiment with poor pike?
I've tried it before, and I've used in the previous list. You had tribal pike, didn't you, if I remember right? So and different varieties, and I think poor pike are just too vulnerable.
Right. So, and actually, because we're also talking about the history in this podcast. I laugh because you've got Greek mercenaries who have been equipped with pike, and you've got these I'm not even going to be able to say it, pantadapoi, which sounds Greek. Now, who were those geezers?
I think these were almost like the local pike, weren't they?
Okay, so they were recruited and trained locally, and as you say, they're formed close, average protected pike, but they're combat shy.
Yeah.
But the key to that is that doesn't upgrade shooters.
No.
Good.
No. The only thing you've got to be wary of is decent foot combat troops. So with those guys, but again, it's numbers. So invariably, they're only 520 points per unit, so they are quite cheap for an 8 block pike.
Absolutely. And so when you deploy your pike, do you check aboard the ones which aren't combat shy? It's interesting. None of your pike have got shoves, so they're not great pike. They're just pike.
Correct. Yeah.
It's a real numbers game.
It's a numbers game, and you do give in. I have been beaten, but by pike which have shove, which is ironic, and it's like they get the roll of the shoves, and they do start pushing over you because obviously they'll get green to whites. just for that +1 advantage. And against the combat shy ones, they'll be yellow to white. So it adds up.
It always amazes me how important that green to white is.
Yeah, because obviously you have the chance of the skull.
Absolutely.
But normally it's a numbers game. So with the pike, they can hold on. So people have got shove, they can have less pike, which means you can work around them. Or they're facing cavalry against another pike block. And the key thing with the cavalry is that there's 4 units. And with the pike, effectively, I say it's a hammer and anvil effect. The anvil is the pike, primarily the combat shy ones. And then effectively you start extending out with the other pike, the drill pike, with the cavalry switching flanks, because of the fact that you have the drilled cavalry as your reserve. One lot of the satrapal cavalry on either side. So effectively you have a cavalry cover on the flanks, and the drilled cavalry can dart to whichever side you want them.
Yeah.
Mention the Cretan archers. They're my little sniper team.
Yeah.
I do actually love them as a unit. I don't stick them out in front to be cannon fodder. They're not there to be run over by the light horse. They're there to snipe.
Yeah.
And it's like Robin can attest to this. They'll nip between 2 pike blocks, and they cause more pain to him than anything else.
Yeah, because they'll be shooting rear ranks, won't they?
Shooting rear ranks, or you shoot like cavalry, and you'll be 4 away from them, so they can't respond. You're shooting greens because the fact that you're skilled, and if they're flexi horse and they're unprotected, you're shooting yellows.
Oh yeah. So yes, I like a. I'm not a great skirmisher user, but I like a little. I can see the skilled bow coming in handy. So you've talked about how you use this. So if I said to you, would you use this list, or have you used this list in an open competition? I think you have, haven't you?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So against all comers.
At BritCon, yeah.
BritCon. I
Yeah.
can't remember what I think I played during BritCon. I think I had Warband, but so really, there's not a lot you fear with this list if you get it right.
There isn't, no. The irony is, one of my other lists is probably one of it's Achilles' heel is the Hussites, because it's got nothing to take on wagons.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about the Hussites. So actually, Sid, so you've got a reputation for choosing really horrible armies, haven't you?
Yeah, I tend to do, don't I?
So Hussites and Asiatic Brick are your favourite armies. What are you working on at the moment? What's your next horrible army?
Oh, the next one is nearly finished. That's the James IV Scots.
So is that 4 pike?
10 pike block.
10 pike blocks. Right. So a theme is emerging here, Sid. So,
yeah, but the thing is, though, as I say, that's a very late medieval one. At the moment, on the painting table is Nicophorians.
Yes.
You should know about those.
I know about those. Yeah. So, okay. So trying to drag it back to the purpose of the podcast, which is to talk about these successor lists. So just to conclude, really draw together, you look through the lists and you chose this because you get the most pike.
Yeah.
See, when I look at it, I look at it and I think, yeah, there's all that pike, but the cavalry, you haven't got that much cavalry. But I guess the pike are so dangerous to anyone trying to attack your cavalry, swarm your cavalry, that I can see why it's a very difficult list to beat. What have you run up against? I mean, I remember you had a big tussle with Jason, and he had a big pike army, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
I know you ultimately you were victorious in that game. But what kind of list? So really good foot is what you don't like.
Yeah, I mean, Nick had a Roman list, Imperial Roman list, and he covered his flanks nicely. One's 4-man tug, superior legionary unit covering on a hill, and that covered his flank from all my cavalry. And in a way, I had to have my pikes on hills to survive against his exceptional legionaries.
Yes.
Okay, and the rest was superior, so it was hard work to survive. I needed the cavalry to do work at the flank, and it just took too long. Nick did well on that one.
Yeah.
And again, the Thracians nearly failed going up a hill against 4 legionaries.
Right. So eight Thracians going uphill against 4
legionaries, and the legionaries were flanked by 2 other cavalry units. They just stood there and defended everything, bounced everything off.
Wow. So when's the next time you think you might use this? What's coming up? If we get back to a normal tournament calendar, what do you think is coming up where you might use it?
I'm saying anything that involves the classics, I'll probably use them because I enjoy using them in the classical period. I think at the moment we've got what's it planned so far? You've got the GT in September. That's an open comp, and we've got your event, haven't we? But that's later, so it's not. These are.
I purposely chose times for my event in each of the periods where you couldn't use this.
No, Robin asked you to do that, didn't he?
I think he did. Yeah, he said I've seen that Ari too many times.
I've kicked him.
So obviously for skull rollers, you'll take something a bit more challenging than this, a bit more challenging to you, not to your opponent.
Yeah, the Scots.
So are the Scots paw pike, just as an aside?
No, it's 10 units of combat shy pike, but front rank is fully armoured.
So, wow, okay.
And counts shield cover. It's shooting proof on the front.
So, okay. So my English longbowmen won't have any fun there.
No, but you just deploy in terrain. There's nothing in the army that can go terrain.
Yeah, but then that could be a very boring game, couldn't it?
Oh yeah, but why would you go on the flats against all that lot?
Yeah,
that's the one negative with the army. It's at least with this, you've got some decent cavalry. I mean, the companions, or especially the 6, is always very handy. It's your equivalent of the charging Norman knights. The fact that you can redirect because it's drilled is very nice.
Yeah, and I like the fact that the satrable cavalry can evade because they're javelin armed. So very useful for many. All right, buddy. Well, listen, I know you're a very busy man. Thanks for talking to us about your list. And I really, my summary is, as many of us do, it's a kind of min-max kind of idea to get the most pike you possibly can. Working out that the combat shy really wasn't that bad for you, and having a solid plan for the games.
Yeah, and the key thing, the other key thing on this list is that you've got decent cavalry, at least 2 units.
Yeah. And actually 7 PBS cards, 2 scouting, you're always going to be there or thereabouts in period anyway.
Yeah, and if you're defending, use the coast.
Definitely anchor on the. But I've always noticed how you may start in a very defensive position, but you're all over the board by the end of the game.
Yeah, if I'm not near Son's camp, it's normally a waste of a game.
Very good. Right, okay, I'm going to leave it there. So thank you very much once again, Sid, and I'll see you very soon.
Yep. Cheers, mate.
Right. So I obviously the min-max thing really is 7 ton.
Yeah, so he's gone for the cheaper versions of the pike, obviously deeming them to be more points effective. So you've got the 4 Pantadapoi combat shy pike and the 3 pike without shove. The thing is that they take a long time to break, so that gives him the time to use the cavalry to do you over. is the point, and it's a tough one because you don't know where to attack. If you attack the pike, you generally don't have enough to face off all 7, and if you're up against the cavalry, then he's got the numbly. So
it's a very effective army. It really suits Sid's playing style as well. This is an army honed to the user.
Yeah, he's not going to make the cavalry an easy target.
No, as he said, he's an extremely efficient counterpuncher. By which I mean he will often set up in what appears to be a relatively defensive position, but he certainly doesn't stay there.
No, it's that kind of starburst.
But also very controlled. So I've played this army a couple of times. I played this exact one about this time last year or earlier, just before lockdown started.
You played him with your Romans, didn't you? I think he mentioned that.
Yeah, I've played him twice. The one with the Romans was a couple of years ago, and I think the list has changed a bit by then because he had some poor pike in there.
Right.
I think the Pantadapoi might have been poor at that stage, or he'd downgraded some. And I mean, we had a great game. He had lots of pikes sitting on hills, and I completely bottled it by not attacking them, even when I had a unit of exceptional legionaries. So we had a good game, but it was a draw. I played him with my Han Chinese, the all-mounted version, last year. Again, that was a classic. I was falling back as he came forwards. I tried to pick on points in his line with the shooting. Unfortunately, my shooting wasn't knocking holes in him until very late in the game.
He reminded me after I had played him I played him once with my Spartan list, my pure Spartan, and actually the really good foot can give him a headache. And I'd set him up where I brought something round on the flank, and not anticipating that he would break off equal speed foot and just take the captain. left me hanging there with, okay, I can go and charge him with the, it was one of those moments, and that bought him enough time because you just get ground in a mill, don't you? You just get, just like a flour mill, you just get ground by this pike. But so I think it very good. I mean, you with your Romans, very good foot. So very good foot can have a go. But obviously then you've got to be able to do something about his 2 tugs of charging lancers. He's got a 6 and a 4, obviously not too shoddy.
Yeah, he's as Richard said, he's 7 units of pikemen give him a good width of stodge to work around. So even if you've got a good chunk of decent infantry, unless you win very quickly, he will start manoeuvring those cavalry round. Companions definitely, but with a flank attack, even the satrapal stuff is, it's going to be short spear with a +4 for a flank attack. It's not, you're going to get
breaking off after, at the end of the turn.
Yeah, and he's pretty skilled with the Cretans.
Yeah.
The difference is he's got 11 tugs where we only have 9 in our lists.
Yes,
and that 2 extra make.
Well, it means he can outgrind anybody.
Yeah, it's a good list. Yeah, if I was going to copy somebody's list for the Asiatic Successor, I'd probably start with this one.
And interestingly, the fact that he dropped any loose order, just dropped it.
Yeah,
it was a distraction.
It is honed through experience. This one, it's a good one. So it's that match of the player who's honed it to work the way he wants it to work in a style he's good at.
If he doesn't come out to play, you're not going to beat it.
No, but he does come out to play.
No, I'm saying, I'm just thinking through the options you've got when he's sitting down in front of it. If he doesn't come out to play, you're not going to. So you've got to offer him something to come out and play. And I think
it's a bit of a bluff there, because if he doesn't come out to play, he's not going to get the points either.
I agree.
Having the courage to not fall into his trap. So the risk, it's a very careful one you have to do with timing, because if you leave it too late, you're not going to score any points. But if you jump in too soon, you're actually falling into his trap, and you'll probably lose and fail to score the points anyway. So it's a real challenge in deciding how much you can engage with, but without getting sucked into the battle.
Yeah, agreed.
And part of that is Sid's experience and skill. Against a less experienced and less skillful player, you can commit earlier because you'll be able to get out. Sid, on the other hand, will pounce on it if you make it.
I find I'm a naturally aggressive player, so I find it particularly hard fighting Sid, because I want to go into that trap. I know I must.
Well, I think also what's interesting about this army, out of all the 4 armies, our 3 in this one, I suspect this is the one best set up to fight out a period.
I mean, and the fact that none of the pike is poor, so yeah, it's vulnerable to shooting, but it's not that vulnerable.
Well, no, it's no more vulnerable than anything else in the army.
Exactly, the combat shy doesn't take it.
If you go out a period, poor, they'll be gunned down by just experienced shooters.
Yeah, he's got too many tugs there to make it particular.
Yeah, no, I meant on a tug by tug basis, not I'm going to break you through shooting. I mean, Nick, you'd probably need 6 hours.
I said a year ago, you can always get lucky with shooting, but what he will say, you've got a horse archer army against it, and I've faced it, and I know he will have the Cretans at the point you really want to gang up. They might be sitting between a couple of pike phalanxes, but you're not going to be able to push them out of the way, and they'll be sniping at you, quite possibly on green dice.
Yeah.
So he knows where to put them.
Yeah.
No, it's a good army. It's a good army led by a good player.
Yeah, he's a very good and an absolute gent to play against. I think one of my favourite games of all time was playing him at Britcom, where we had 3 jugs of beer during the game. It was hilarious.
he's one of those players it's a pleasure to be beaten by.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you beat him, he takes it in perfect grace.
I haven't done that. Oh, no, I have done that. Sorry, I haven't done that. I haven't done that. I have done. So moving on then. So we've heard about the history. We've looked at what's available to us, and we've looked at three. I mean, the thing about these lists is, there are differences in the list, but they're successor lists. There's going to be a common theme in them, and we've brought out those themes. What Sid's managed to do is so moving on now. So really, figure manufacturers. I'm going to go first because I'm just going to say Zyston. There you go, because they're beautiful.
Because everybody else was going to.
Yeah, well, I got in there first. So Zyston are beautiful. They are 18mm, to be fair, but for the style of painting that you want to do they've got the deep cuts, so you flow paint in. They're just. You obviously have to drill and glue one hell of a lot of pikes if you're doing one of these armies with size, and they're not cheap, but they are beautiful. So who has the next put forward after I've mentioned Zyston?
Well, my reaction is, why wouldn't you with the Zyston? All I'm going to do is cheat and say that I still have some 28mm Hinchcliffe Macedonian phalangites, which were the first lead figures I ever bought, and I still use them to this day. So
love it.
That's
25 or 28mm?
probably 25 in those days.
Yeah, I think it was 25. Was I remember those?
Yeah, it's probably where we all started.
Yeah,
back in that day. Yeah. Well, I'd like you to. I would say I personally wouldn't look any further than Zyston. But the point Ray made about drilling hands and the separate shields, some people really don't like that. I mean, I know yourself, Ray. You.
Well, I managed to drill my own hand more than I drilled the hands of the phalangites.
So, I mean, I think a possible next choice would be Forged in Battle, who do a reasonably extensive range. Got Macedonian Successors, got Greeks in the Seleucid range. May have some Persians, I can't remember, but between those ranges, you should be able to get near enough all the figures you need for both of these lists we've been looked today. Again, they're good price. They paint up really nicely. Again, they've got good deep detail if that's something you need for your painting style. It's something I like. I'm very much a block colours, ink wash to hide the problems approach. The only thing I'm not keen on personally about some of the Forged in Battle are the pikemen have shields I think are a bit small. That's personal taste, personal thing. Okay, the phalangites didn't have the whopping great aspis that the old hoplites did, but it wasn't a tiny shield, and I think the Forged in Battle one's a bit too small. But you get, they're good range, good price, good service from them. They do loads of stuff. They certainly be there on my recommend list.
Yeah, I can't fault them on all those things like service.
I think their pikemen are still open-handed, but they are open-handed and you don't end up having to drill them.
Right.
I had a few a couple of years ago where I decided I didn't need them, sold them.
I mean, I've got a lot of in battle stuff. I was just looking at those elephants. They've got a wide range of elements. Anyway, 3 or 4 different types of elephants in the Successor. I wonder what so they've got some in the later Seleucid elephant.
I'm guessing they're going to be armoured, aren't they?
Yeah. So everything. So I agree. There's nothing, I don't think, in any of the permutation about that you can't. It's worth mentioning Essex because again, Essex is reasonably priced and you can get anything. You might have to make a few compromises and got to be able to paint like a grandma. But Matthew Hayward always says, "Oh yeah, I like Essex." Yeah, it's because you're a genius, Matthew. Us mere mortals.
They're very reliable. They're very reliable figures. The clean casts.
What about the Z? Have the Z range boys brought any? Are they coming out, or have they brought anything out yet?
Oh, museum miniatures. Yeah, they've certainly got some pikemen and hoplites I know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, people seem very keen on them, and
yeah, so
they're cheaper than a lot of suppliers.
Yeah, watch this space on when that range fills out, whether you can do any of these armies with those.
Yeah, and as we know, they do an annual sale, usually Christmas, January, some ridiculous amount, like 25% off or something.
I think I was desperately trying to find something. I nearly bought the Indians at White Oil.
Yeah, I mean, their sale prices are such you start looking for armies to do.
25% off in January.
Yeah.
And then, so I feel a bit, I haven't actually done any of these armies. So shield transfers, the usual suspects. I think Fortunate Battle will have a shield transfer for any of the shields they do. I think supplied by Little Big Man Studios.
I think they are, yes. Zyklon definitely have Little Big Man transfers.
And I'm sure there are, other. I'm not trying to be clever, but I know there are other shield transfer manufacturers.
One always to remember is the Vini Vidi Vici water slide transfers, which are significantly cheaper than Little Big Man.
And actually easier to use in some respects.
They're very easy to use, and certainly for something like a Macedonian star, to a bronze shield, you don't need anything particularly fancy, and it looks really effective.
Yeah,
especially across. So take Sid's army for instance. You had those 7 blocks of pie. That's 14 bases wide. That will look really good.
And they go on like the old Airfix models, don't they? Our old Airfix models where they're water slide transfers.
Soak them in water. Lift them off with a soft brush, plonk them on, dab off the excess water.
I have to admit, I think when I got my first Little Big Man Studio shield transfer, that's how I tried to apply them. I, of course, did not read the instructions. Why would you do that? And funnily enough, my Lithuanians had no shield transfer.
There's an art with the Little Big Man.
Yeah, there really is.
And some people don't like them because they find them fiddly.
Get a really good hobby knife.
For the round ones like pikeman shields.
The
pikeman shield, the hole punch.
Yeah.
Get a.
Do you have a hole punch that you hit with a hammer?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Lots of different sizes.
You can get them up to 10, 12 mil easily.
Okay, so I guess for me, we're drawing to the end of what we've tried to achieve. I think it's worth, because the three of us are heavily involved in tournaments, i.e. we go to them. I was going to say we umpire them, but it certainly wouldn't be me. They are umpired by people like this, and I tend to be the cat herder who organises people, gets them to come to the tournaments. Along with Nick, and organise prizes and things like that. And we're in these dog days of COVID. We're all quite old. We'll all be getting our jabs soon. We're looking at the tournament scene, all being well, hopefully opening up again. And I think that we've got some smaller tournaments, kind of warm-up tournaments, which are more events really. The first big proper tournament where people are likely to get a ticket to right now, we will be. So what are we having in July, Nick? Do you remember?
Hammy was thinking of running something in Daventry at Battlefield Hobbies. Possibly
so,
for one day, just to make it more flexible.
A one-day event in Daventry, so right in the, so you can't get close to the centre of the country in Daventry. And I think we're hopefully going to have full fat Big Meg that we've been talking about tonight, and also Pacto, maybe some Pacto games going on. So that's July. In August, I think there's a Ribble Rumble planned.
You could be right there.
Yeah, up in hopefully in Stockport at Element Games, where they have a bar. Biased me to a particular venue.
But they have a bar.
In September, we have the big one, obviously, which is our World Championship, the Skull Roll Champion, which is at Olympic Stadium, I believe. Is that right?
Lee Valley Leisure Centre or something.
The Lee Valley Centre, which is part of, come on, go with me here, part of the Olympic Stadium. Because I just find it so ironic that a bunch of war games are turning up at this. So, and that's a much bigger event. But our event within the bigger event is our individual. So things are getting back. Also, Warfare, that's at a bigger venue this year. So it's not in Reading at the Riverside Leisure Centre. It's at Ascot at the racecourse. So I believe that could be a lot bigger. So watch out for news about the tournament scene. So, gentlemen, it's been a real blast. I hope people are listening. I hope they're painting and enjoying what we're saying. Do you have any final thoughts, guys?
I just wanted to mention a couple of books for people who are interested in the period. The Bible for Figures is Duncan Head's Armies of the Macedonian and Punic Wars, which still can't be beaten.
Absolutely.
I got the original version back in 1982, possibly, and it's still available on the internet if you want to get it there. In the realms of fiction, I thoroughly recommend Alfred Duggan's Elephant and Castles, also known as Besieger of Cities. That's his book on Demetrius Poliorcetes, the Besieger. Well worth reading. And if you want a history of the wars themselves, I think the best series are the entitled The Wars of Alexander's Successors by Bob Bennett and Mike Roberts. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I'd concur with that. The Duncan Head book, absolute must. If you buy nothing else, buy that one. I'd also say, and I'm surprised Richard hasn't done this, to mention the Society of Ancients as a well worth resource with their bi-monthly journal, Slingshot. But just linking to Duncan Head's book, the SOA also have an online forum, and Duncan Head is a regular contributor there and is usually incredibly helpful. If you're asking questions about the history, suitable figures, or anything like that, you can sort of you can communicate with the man who wrote the book you have to have.
That is excellent.
The SOA is well worth joining anyway for Slingshot, which is has really interesting articles. And if you become a member, just to appeal to the mercenary side of people, there are discounts available from figure manufacturers.
And isn't the president of the Society of Ancients one of our lot this year?
Indeed, Simon Elliott has taken over from the 1st of January as president of the Society of Ancients. Yours truly is the treasurer, so it's nice to hear such a ringing endorsement. Society, which has been going since 1965. September 1965 was the first of Slingshot, and we've just recently released the 55 years of Slingshot compilation, which has 320 issues of Slingshot, all fully indexed and available for members.
It's a fascinating history. It's as old as I am. I arrived in September 1965.
Yeah, a bit before my time, that.
Yeah, I'll leave our esteemed listener to decide whether Slingshot or myself.
It beholden to me to say thank you guys for giving up your time. I hope people enjoyed this. One of the things that we will be doing, obviously you can't do it on your first one, but we'll be having a kind of umpire's corner where you can send in some questions, and if we find one which is suitably difficult to answer, we'll have a debate and answer that. Maybe get Simon involved as well. And as my final thought, we wish all the best to Simon. The rules that we all enjoy playing, because he is still in recovery and will be recovering till April. Prognosis is good. And then I think I can feel the pent-up energy inside him already, that in April we will be bringing everything up to date, just in time to come out of COVID with all the 2021 list builder and points, and a few errata, presumably, in the compendium edition. And if you're listening to this and you haven't got the compendium edition, I have to say, in terms of production values, quality, value for money, I honestly think are fantastic. I'm a little bit. So if you want to meet any of us, me, Sid, Richard or Nick, come to a tournament. We're always there. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.